There's a kind of loneliness that I don't think we talk about enough. It's not the loneliness of being single. It's not the loneliness of a bad day or a rough week or feeling disconnected from your friends. It's the loneliness of being married and still feeling like no one is really with you. It's being needed all day long and cared for by no one. It's sharing a home, a bed, a bank account, a last name, and still feeling like you're doing all of it alone. It is lying next to someone at night and feeling like a stranger is sleeping there. And what makes it so painful is this: from the outside, everything looks fine. The house looks fine, the family looks fine, the holidays look fine on social media. But inside, you're running on empty. You have been running on empty for a very long time. And you're starting to wonder if this is just what life is now. If that is where you are, I made this episode just for you. Let's get into it. Hi, I'm Lisa, and this is the Pattern Breakers Collective, the podcast where we tell the truth about the patterns that women have been told to accept, normalize, and smile through. Every week, we dig into the psychology of why women get stuck in relationships and patterns and versions of themselves that were shaped by someone else, and how they find their way back. Quick note before we go anywhere. When I talk about unhealthy relationship dynamics, I'll often say he for the partner causing harm. That is based on the patterns that I have worked in for years and my own experience. But I know that this is not everyone's story. Anyone can cause harm and anyone can be harmed. This space is for anyone who sees themselves in what I'm describing. Now, today's episode has been one that's been sitting with me for quite a while, because we talk a lot on the show about abuse, about coercive control, about gaslighting, and about narcissism. And those conversations are important and necessary. But today, I want to make room for the women whose pain doesn't always have a dramatic name, the women who don't necessarily have a horror story, just a long, exhausting story, a quiet story, a story about giving and giving and giving and slowly disappearing. And I also want to talk about something that's happening right now, something I think that is long overdue and that some people are celebrating and some people are absolutely losing their minds over. Women are waking up and they are done. We'll get to that. I think one of the hardest things for women to say out loud is not, my marriage was abusive. Sometimes the harder sentence, the one that takes more courage to actually say, is, I was really lonely the whole time. Because lonely doesn't feel like enough of a reason. Lonely feels like maybe you're just not grateful enough. Maybe you have too high expectations. Maybe you should just count your blessings and get over it. But here's what I want to say. That loneliness inside of a marriage is one of the most destabilizing things a woman can experience, because you're not supposed to be lonely. You're married. You made the commitment. You built the life. So why does it feel like this? Because for a lot of women, it doesn't look dramatic from the outside. There's no screaming every day. There's no one specific thing that you can point to. It looks quieter than that. It looks like you being the one who remembers everything, every appointment, every school event, every birthday, every bill that needs to be paid. Well, he just shows up. It looks like having a full conversation about something that matters to you, something that you're excited about or worried about or just feeling, and watching him look at his phone. It looks like having to do the emotional work of the entire household, keeping track of how everyone's feeling, making sure the kids are okay, making sure he's not in a bad mood, making sure the environment is calm enough for everyone else to function, while no one is doing any of that for you. It looks like going to bed at night, sharing a bed, and sometimes even your body with someone, yet feeling more alone than you would feel sleeping by yourself, feeling disconnected instead of close, used instead of cherished, and realizing that the physical proximity is not the same thing as intimacy. And over time, that loneliness becomes your normal, not because it stops hurting, but because it is constant. And anything constant eventually starts to feel like just the way things are. That is not just the way things are. That is emotional abandonment, and it has a cost. whether you have a name for it yet or not. I want to talk about something that I think sits underneath a lot of what women are feeling right now. Most of us, at least those of us in a certain age group, were sold a story about marriage. From the time we were little girls, through Disney movies and rom-coms and our mothers and our grandmothers and our churches and our culture, we were taught that marriage was the destination, that it was the thing that meant you had made it. You were loved, you were safe, you were finally chosen. Nobody sat us down and said, hey, by the way, there's a version of this where you will work full time, come home, cook dinner, put the kids to bed, handle the emotional needs of everyone in the house, keep track of every single thing that needs doing, carry the mental load of the entire family, and he will sit on the couch watching TV and wonder why you seem tired. Nobody warned us about that version. And so women entered marriage with everything they had: their intelligence, their creativity, their ambition, their labor, their bodies, their time, their dreams, their absolute best. And what so many of them got back was not partnership. It was responsibility, management, endless endurance, being needed by everyone and truly nurtured by no one. And the worst part, that gap between what women were promised and what they actually got doesn't just create disappointment, it creates self-doubt. You start thinking, maybe I'm asking for too much. Maybe this is just what adult life is. Maybe all marriages feel like this eventually. Maybe I'm being ungrateful. Maybe I'm the problem because I still want more. You are not asking for too much. You were given too little, and there is a big difference between those two things. Let's talk about how marriage can grind some women down in every area of their lives. I want to get really specific here because I think women need to hear their actual lives reflected back to them, not just vague language about not feeling seen. So let me walk through the different areas of life where this plays out. And as I go through these, I want you to notice which one hits home for you. First is the mental load and the housework. Let's start here because this is where so many women are completely worn out. You are not just doing more of the housework. You are carrying the invisible work underneath all of it. You know that the kids need new shoes before school starts. You know that your mother-in-law's birthday is coming up and someone needs to buy a card. You know that the car needs an oil change, the dentist appointment needs rescheduling, and the fridge is running low. He doesn't know these things because you've been managing them so seamlessly that he doesn't have to. And when you finally say something about it, his response is, well, why didn't you just ask me to help? And you want to scream because asking for help with something that he should be doing without being asked is its own exhausting full-time job. You are not his mother. You should not have to manage him. This is not a small thing. Research consistently shows that women in heterosexual partnerships do significantly more unpaid labor, even when both partners work full-time. That invisible labor takes up mental space, emotional energy, and time that could be going toward your own rest, your own goals, and your own joy. Next up is your career and your ambitions. How many women put their careers on hold or scaled them way back because someone had to, and it ended up being her? How many women passed up a promotion, turned down a job that would have required travel, stopped going back to school, or quietly let their professional goals shrink down to fit inside of the life that the marriage required? And how many times did that happen without it even being a real conversation? It just became the assumption that she would be the flexible one. She would be the one to adjust. She would be the one who had to figure it out. And now, years later, she looks at where she thought she would be by this point in her life, and the distance between that and where she actually is can be gutting. Next is the kids. This one is complicated because most women genuinely love their children deeply. That part is not the question. But there is a version of motherhood that is also incredibly lonely. When you are the primary parent, the default parent, the on-call parent, and he gets to be the fun weekend dad who shows up when it's convenient and gets thanked for it like he did something extraordinary, you are the one managing the homework, the meltdowns, the sick days, and the emotional regulation, and the teacher emails, and the bedtime battles. He puts them to bed twice a month, and everyone acts like he deserves a parade. And you love your kids so much that you stay. You stay because you don't want to break up the home. You stay because you're afraid of what a custody arrangement looks like. You stay because their happiness has been woven so deeply into your definition of your own worth that leaving feels like failing them. We're going to talk more about that in a little bit, but I want you to hear this now. Wanting more for yourself is not a betrayal of your children. You are allowed to model what it looks like to be treated with respect. Okay, next is the money. Financial dynamics in marriage can be complicated, and for some women, they are a direct source of control. Maybe you don't have your own money. Maybe you have to ask for things. Maybe there is a constant criticism about how you spend, even on basic necessities. Maybe his money is his, and the household money is somehow your responsibility to manage and account for, but you have no real say in the big decisions. Or maybe the financial imbalance is less overt than that. You both work, but you have less earning power, less savings, less financial security than you would have if you'd stayed single or made different choices, because the marriage required you to compromise in ways that cost you financially. Financial dependency is one of the biggest reasons women stay in marriages that are making them miserable. And if that is part of your story, it is not weakness. It is a very real structural barrier that needs to be acknowledged. Next up is your sexuality and your body. I want to include this because women often suffer in silence here, and they shouldn't have to. For some women, sex in their marriage has become something they dread, something they go through the motions of, something that stopped feeling like intimacy a long time ago and started feeling like a transaction or an obligation or something that they do just to keep the peace. Some women have been pressured, guilted, or coerced into sexual contact that they didn't want. We talked in depth on a previous episode on sexual coercion, so I won't go super deep here, but I want to say clearly, your body is yours, even inside of a marriage. And intimacy is supposed to be something that comes from desire and connection, not obligation and fear. And on the other side of that, there are women whose partners have completely withdrawn physically, and that rejection repeated over years creates its own specific kind of pain. Wondering what's wrong with you, wondering if you're still desirable, wondering if the person who chose you seems to have stopped wanting you. Both of these things happen, and both of them deserve to be talked about. Next up is the emotional labor. This might be the one that drains women the most, and it's also the one that's hardest to explain to someone who hasn't lived it. You are the emotional center of the whole household. You manage your own feelings. You manage his feelings, anticipating his moods, softening his bad days, managing his anger, trying to keep him regulated so that the home stays calm. You also manage the kids' feelings. You manage everyone else's needs. And you do all of that while your own feelings go largely unmanaged by other people, unasked about, unreceived. Because who is showing up for you? Who is asking how you are and actually wanting a real answer? Who is holding space for your stress, your grief, your fears, your hopes? If the answer is basically nobody, you are not alone. And I want you to hear how unreasonable that is. Not unfamiliar, unreasonable. You deserve to have someone show up for you. Okay, let's talk about something that is happening right now that I think is really important. There is a major shift happening with women, a real one, and it has been a long time coming. Women are starting to say enough. Enough of doing all the work and getting none of the credit. Enough of managing everyone else's emotions while my own go completely ignored. Enough of being expected to be available, agreeable, attractive, productive, nurturing, accommodating constantly, while my needs stay at the bottom of everyone else's list. Women are setting standards. They're naming what they will and will not accept. They're walking away from relationships that are taking everything and giving back almost nothing. They're learning their worth and deciding to actually live by it. They are using their voices, finding their anger, asking out loud for the things that they used to ask for only in their heads late at night after everyone else was asleep. And here's the reaction to all of that. A lot of men are absolutely furious that women are no longer willing to quietly tolerate what previous generations were expected to endure. And I say this with all the pointed sarcasm I can muster because what a shocking development. Women wanting peace, respect, and reciprocity. The same men who benefited for years from women who asked for nothing, expected nothing, and absorbed everything, they're now upset that women have decided to stop doing that. They are calling women difficult. They're calling them angry. They're saying women have changed, that they're being unreasonable, that they have unrealistic expectations, that they are too much now. But let me tell you what's actually happening. It is not that women have become too much. It is that men who got used to too little are now being asked to meet a reasonable standard, and that feels like an attack. Men don't like being held accountable for things that they have been doing, or better, not doing, for a very long time. They don't like that their emotional unavailability now has a name. They don't like that their passive participation in the household is no longer just accepted as how things are. They don't like that women are saying, I need a real partner, not a roommate who I also have to parent. They don't like being called out for the sexual pressure and coercion that women have tolerated for so long without ever labeling it. They don't like that their control, financial, emotional, and physical, is now being named as control. They don't like that women are comparing notes and recognizing that what they normalized was not actually okay. Here's the truth. When you have been in a position of power and that power starts to be challenged, it does not feel like equity. It feels like a loss. It feels like an attack. And so men who feel entitled to a certain kind of woman, compliant, accommodating, grateful, quiet, they experience a woman with standards as a threat. You know what? That is not a woman's problem to fix. Women raising their standards does not mean they hate men. It does not mean they're bitter. It does not mean they're impossible to please. It means they finally started believing that they deserve more than what they were accepting. And they're right. You are not too much. You were just too long around people who gave you too little. So if you are in a marriage right now where the very act of wanting more, of asking for reciprocity, of expecting emotional presence, of naming what isn't working, makes you feel like the problem, I want you to hear this clearly. The problem is not your standards. The problem is that your standards are being treated as a personal attack by someone who got very comfortable with your absence of them. Now I want to talk about the process of how women lose themselves in their relationships, because I think understanding how this happens helps women to stop blaming themselves for not catching it sooner. Women don't lose themselves in one big dramatic moment. They lose themselves slowly, in tiny daily concessions that each feel reasonable on their own. You stop bringing something up because the last 3 times you brought it up, it became a whole fight, or you shut down, or you just got nowhere. So you just don't bring it up anymore. You stop asking for help because asking turns into nagging, turns into an argument, and honestly, it's just easier to do it yourself than to manage the fallout. You stop talking about what you want, what you dream about, what you need, what would make you feel good, because those conversations always seem to land sideways. He doesn't quite track, or he dismisses it, or he turns it around, so you stop going there. You start presenting a smaller version of yourself, a less opinionated version, a less demanding version, a version that the relationship can handle without friction. And then one day, maybe it's a morning when you're getting ready, or a quiet moment in the car, or some random conversation with a friend that you haven't talked to in a while, something hits you. You don't know who you are anymore. Not really. You know who you are in the household. You know what you do here. But who you are apart from all of that, that moment of not recognizing yourself, that is one of the most disorienting things a woman can feel. And it happens to women across the whole spectrum, from marriages that are simply cold and disconnected, all the way to marriages that are actively abusive. The difference is the reason it happened. In a neglectful marriage, you disappear because there was never enough space for you, because you kept shrinking to fit the gaps, because the relationship trained you over time to believe that your needs were optional. In an abusive marriage, You disappear because you were taught to, criticized until you stopped believing in yourself, controlled until you stopped making your own decisions, gaslit until you stopped trusting your own mind, isolated until you stopped having people to reflect yourself back to you. Both are real, and both need to be named. And now I want to spend a moment in something that comes up a lot because I hear women downplaying their experience constantly. They say something like, well, he wasn't abusive. He just wasn't really there for me. Or he wasn't mean. He just didn't show up. Or he didn't hurt me. He just wasn't present. And they use the word just like it makes the thing smaller. It doesn't. Chronic emotional neglect, being constantly unseen, uncared for, unimportant to the person who is supposed to be your primary partner in life, does real psychological damage. It chips away at your self-worth. It creates a low-grade depression in you that you might not even recognize as depression because it has just become the background of your life. It creates anxiety. It creates a state of constantly reaching for something that never comes. And women often feel guilty for naming it because he's not a monster. He goes to work. He doesn't cheat. He doesn't hit anyone. So they think, well, who am I to complain? You are a person who deserved a real partner and you did not get one. That is allowed to hurt and that is allowed to matter. Now, for the women who are in marriages where it is more than neglect, where there is control, fear, coercion, intimidation, I want to be direct with you. If you have to monitor his moods to keep yourself physically safe, if you shrink yourself to avoid the fallout when he's upset, if you have been guilted, criticized, humiliated, or gaslit so consistently that you no longer trust your own mind, that is not quote unquote a hard marriage. That is abuse. If he controls the money so that you cannot leave, if he pressures you or coerces you sexually, if he has threatened you or your children, if he has isolated you from people who could support you, that is abuse. And I say that with care, not with judgment, because I know how hard it is to put that word on your own life when you are inside of it. But you need language for what you're living. Because without language, you cannot get help. And without help, it is so much harder to get out. So the question becomes, do I leave? And if so, when and how? I want to spend some real time here because I think this is the question that lives underneath everything else for a lot of women. And I want to say up front, I am not here to tell you what to do. That is not my role. Only you can make that decision and only you know the full picture of your life. But what I can do is name some of the very real things that make that decision complicated because I don't think women get enough credit for how genuinely hard it is. This is almost always the first thing women say. I can't leave because of the kids. And I get it. I really, really do. The idea of disrupting their home, of custody arrangements, of your children going back and forth between two houses, that is scary and painful and real. But I also want to gently offer something else. Your children are watching how you are being treated. They are learning what love looks like. They are building their own templates for what relationships are supposed to feel like and what is and what isn't acceptable to tolerate from a partner. If you stay in a marriage where you are being controlled, disrespected, emotionally neglected, or abused, your children are learning that too. Not because you're teaching it to them on purpose, but because they see. Kids always see. Staying for the kids is a genuine consideration, but leaving for the kids and for yourself can also be a real one. The next reason is faith and culture. For many women, leaving a marriage is not just a personal decision. It is a spiritual one or a cultural one. It carries weight that people outside that experience just simply don't understand. Maybe your faith community teaches that marriage is sacred and permanent. Maybe divorce carries a deep stigma in your culture. Maybe your family would not understand or would be ashamed or would turn away from you. Maybe you have been told that suffering through a bad marriage is what a good woman does. I want to speak to that directly. Your life matters. Your safety matters. Your well being matters. And no faith tradition at its core is asking you to stay in a place where you are being destroyed. I also know that saying that is easy from the outside, and living it in a community that might not support you is an entirely different thing. If this is where you are, please find at least one person inside of your faith community or your cultural circle who you can trust to have an honest conversation with. There are usually more people than you expect who understand more than they are allowed to say publicly. The next reason is money. Financial fear keeps more women in marriages more than almost anything else. And I want to validate that completely because it is so real. If you have been out of the workforce or underemployed or financially dependent, the question of, can I actually support myself, is not an abstract fear. It is a practical one. What I want to say here is this: start gathering information before you make any decision. Not information for confrontation, information for yourself. Do you have access to bank accounts? Do you know what the household finances actually look like? Do you have any money that is yours alone? Are there local resources like domestic violence organizations, legal aid, or financial assistance that could help you if you needed them? Knowledge is power here, and you don't have to have everything figured out before you start quietly building your awareness of what your options are. The next and most important reason is safety. I have to name this plainly. If you are in a marriage where you are physically afraid, where you have been threatened, where you believe that leaving could put you or your children in danger, please do not leave without a safety plan. The statistics on this are sobering. The most dangerous time in an abusive relationship is often the period of separation or leaving. I am not saying that to scare you into staying. It is said so that you leave safely. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24 hours a day at 1-800-799-7233, or you can chat at thehotline.org. They have help with safety planning. You do not have to be ready to leave to call. You just have to be ready to get information. And then there are the women who simply aren't sure yet. They're still in the thick of it. They haven't decided. They don't know if they want to leave, try to fix it, survive it, or something else entirely. And if that is you, you don't have to have an answer right now. What you do need to do is stop pretending that everything is fine. Stop minimizing your own experience. Stop waiting for things to get bad enough to quote unquote count. And start doing the things in this next section, the everyday things that help you find yourself again, regardless of what decision you eventually make. I want to share something here because I think there's a particular kind of loneliness that comes not just from the experience itself, but from not being able to say it out loud. Because from the outside, your life looks fine. And so you can't really explain to anyone why you feel like you're disappearing. I remember what it felt like to have my entire world organized around someone else's moods, to wake up in the morning and scan the atmosphere before I even got out of bed. Is today going to be okay? Is he in a bad mood? What happened last night? Is that still a thing today? How do I move through this morning without making it worse? That is not a peaceful way to live, but it had become so normal that I didn't even notice I was doing it anymore. I also remember what it felt like to stop dreaming, not in the dramatic sense, more like the quiet ambitions I used to carry around just went quiet because there weren't room for them. Because every time I expanded a little, something brought me back down. And eventually, I just stopped expanding. And one of the most specific things I remember is this: I stopped having opinions in a certain way. I would catch myself before I spoke. I would do a quick calculation. Is this worth saying? Will this start something? Is it safer just to agree? And most of the time, yeah, it was just safer just to agree. That process of silencing yourself in small ways over and over until you've gone quiet in a way that feels like your own choice but actually isn't, that is one of the more insidious things that happens to women inside of these relationships. I tell you this not to make this episode about me, but because I know that there are women listening who just felt the specific truth of that. And I want them to know that recognition is important. That is your body and your mind saying, yes, I know this. I have lived this. And if you are living it right now, you are not crazy. You are not overreacting. And the life that you want is still possible for you. We spend so much time asking whether a marriage worked or didn't work, whether it was worth saving, whether she tried hard enough. But I want to ask a different question. What did it cost her? What did she end up giving while she was trying to hold that life together? Did she give up years of her career, years of her income and financial independence, years of her health, both physical and mental, that got pushed to the back of the line because everyone else always came first? Did she give up her confidence, the voice that used to speak up in rooms, the parts of her personality that used to be loud and funny and opinionated and bold? Did she give up friendships that got quietly deprioritized because the relationship took up all of the space? Family relationships that got strained or severed? The version of herself that those people knew and loved? Did she give up joy, the small daily joys that slowly stopped feeling available to her, the ability to feel fully present in a good moment because there was always something unresolved sitting beneath it? Did she give up her sense of self, her trust in her own judgment, her belief in her own worth, her knowledge of what she wanted? These are not small losses. They are enormous. And women deserve to be able to say that out loud without being told that they're being dramatic. And I do think that women are finally starting to say it out loud. That is part of the shift I described earlier. Women are looking back at what they gave and what they got, and they are doing the math, and the math is not adding up. And that reckoning is important. It's not bitterness, it's honesty. And honesty is where everything starts. So let's talk about what you can do right now. Some everyday things that actually help. I want to spend some real time here because this is the part that matters most to me. Because I know that some of you listening today are in a place where making big decisions feel impossible. Maybe you're not ready to leave. Maybe you don't know if you want to leave. Maybe leaving is not safe right now. Maybe you're still figuring out what you even feel. And I want to give you something that works regardless of where you are. Not 10 steps to suddenly being okay, but real everyday things that start to just shift something inside of you slowly, quietly, and genuinely. Okay, here they are. Number 1, start noticing your own experience, not his intentions. This is where it starts, not with a big decision, with attention. How do you actually feel in this marriage? Not how do you think you should feel, not what you can explain or justify, just how do you feel? Do you feel safe to be honest? Do you feel like your needs matter? Do you feel smaller than you used to? Do you feel a low-grade dread most days? Just start noticing. You don't have to do anything with it yet. Noticing is the first act of taking yourself seriously again. Number 2, stop minimizing what your body already knows. Your body is not confused. It has been telling you things that your mind has been arguing away for a long time. The tightness in your chest, the exhaustion that never goes away, the dread before you walk in the door, the relief when he's not home. Those are not random. Those are information. Stop dismissing them as just anxiety or just stress and start treating them as data. Number 3, get one thing in your week that is only yours. I don't mean a vacation. I mean something small, regular, and non-negotiable, like a walk by yourself every morning, a phone call with a friend every week, a class you go to, an hour somewhere where you are just you, not a wife, not a mom, not a household manager, just yourself. This sounds small, but it is not small. It is the beginning of remembering that you exist outside of all of the other roles that you hold. Number 4, reconnect with who you were before the relationship. This is the question that I want you to sit with. Who were you before you became this version of yourself? What did you care about? What made you light up? What did you want that you stopped wanting because there was no room for it? Start asking those questions, not to torture yourself with what you lost, but to start locating yourself again. You haven't disappeared. You are underneath in there somewhere, and you can come back. Number 5, write things down. Not for a court case, not for confrontation, for yourself. Write down what happened, what you felt, what your body registered. Date it. Keep it somewhere private. This does 2 things. It keeps your version of reality anchored somewhere outside of your head, so it cannot be rewritten by someone who benefits from your confusion. And it helps you to start to see the pattern when you look back over time, because patterns on paper are a lot harder to explain away. Number 6, say the truth somewhere safe. You don't have to say it to everyone. You don't have to say it all at once, but find somewhere, a trusted friend, a therapist, a journal, even a private voice note to yourself in your car, and start saying what is actually true. Not the version that you've been presenting, the real version, because silence is where so many women stay trapped. And the first time you hear your own truth said out loud, something starts to shift. It is small, but it is real. Number 7, get a therapist who truly understands this. Not just any therapist, someone who understands relationship dynamics, coercive control, and emotional abuse specifically. Because talking to someone who doesn't understand these patterns can actually make things worse. They may inadvertently send you back to try harder, communicate better, when that advice completely misses what's actually happening. A good trauma-informed therapist will help you understand what you've been living in. That understanding is the foundation that everything else is built on. Number 8, stop waiting for it to get bad enough. This one is for the women who keep saying, oh, it's not that bad, or things could be worse, or at least he doesn't, and you can fill in the blank with whatever excuse you're making there. I want to offer you this. You do not need to reach a certain level of bad before your experience is allowed to be taken seriously. Chronically unhappy counts. Chronically lonely counts. Chronically unseen, unheard, and uncared for counts. You do not have to wait until you hit a wall to acknowledge that you have been running into it for a while. Number 9, start learning about your financial options. Quietly, privately, in what feels safe. What would your financial picture look like if you were on your own? What do you earn or could you earn? What does the marital estate look like? What are your legal rights in your state or country? You don't have to decide anything, but knowing your options changes how trapped you feel, and feeling less trapped changes what feels possible. And number 10, give yourself permission to want more. This might be the most important one. You are allowed to want a relationship where you are genuinely seen, where your needs are taken seriously, where someone shows up for you in the way that you show up for everyone else, where you feel safe to be fully yourself. That is not too much to want. That is the baseline. And deciding that you want it and that you deserve it is where the rest of all of this begins. At some point, and I've seen this happen with so many women, the question changes. You stop asking, how do I make this work? How do I explain myself better? How do I get him to understand? How do I hold this together for one more year? And you start asking something different. What is this costing me? Can I actually live like this long term? Not survive, but live. Who am I becoming if I stay here? And is this who I want to be? That shift from how do I fix this to what is this doing to me is enormous. It's not giving up. It is growing up into your own truth. It moves you from constantly trying to manage someone else's reality to finally asking about your own. And from that question, things start to change. Maybe not overnight, maybe not in a way that you can even see yet, but you have crossed a line. You've started treating your own life as something worth asking honest questions about, and that is the beginning. I want to close this with something real. If this episode resonated with you, if you heard yourself in any part of it, I want you to know that what you are feeling is not dramatic. It is not selfish. It is not you failing to be grateful enough. It is a woman whose life has been asking too much of her and giving too little back. And that woman is finally starting to say, enough. That is not a crisis. That is a beginning. And I want to say something to the women who are angry. Good. Keep that. Anger is often the first clear feeling women let themselves have after years of managing everything else. And your anger is appropriate. It is the appropriate response to years of being given less than you deserved, of being expected to ask for nothing, of watching yourself slowly disappear inside of a life that was supposed to include you. Let it be fuel, not destruction, fuel. Use it to start making decisions from a place of self-respect instead of fear. Use it to stop tolerating the things that you have been tolerating. Use it to start building something quietly, daily, that belongs to just you. And now I want to say something to the women who are not angry yet, the ones who are just sad and just tired, just quietly going through the motions and not quite sure how they got here. You are allowed to be exactly where you are. You don't have to be angry before your pain counts. You don't have to have a plan before you're allowed to acknowledge the truth. You are allowed to be in the middle of figuring it out and still deserve support. And to the women who are scared, who are in situations where safety is a real concern, where leaving is genuinely dangerous, where the path forward is complicated by very real circumstances, I see you. Please reach out for help. The resources in the show notes are there for you. You do not have to figure this out alone. For every woman listening, you are not failing because something in you is waking up and refusing to keep going the way things have been going. You are not selfish because you want a life that includes you. You are not broken because a relationship that was supposed to be a partnership turned into something else entirely, and you are not too late. You are not too old. You have not waited too long. You are right where you are, and from here, from exactly here, you can start. The voice inside of you that's been saying, I can't keep doing this, is not trying to ruin your life. It may be trying to save it. Listen to it. If this episode resonated with you, please consider forwarding it to a woman who may need to hear these words today. Sometimes one conversation, one message, one moment of feeling seen can change everything. And if this show has supported you, I would be so grateful if you could take a moment to leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps other women find this space and reminds the algorithm that these conversations matter. Until next time, keep breaking every pattern that was never yours to carry.